The resurrection of Jesus Christ is the defining miracle of the Christian faith. Well, today, in the very site where many believe that event took place, signs and wonders still happen.
For nearly 2,000 years, human hands guarded one small chamber in Jerusalem, believing that beneath successive shrines lay the place where Jesus Christ was buried. Empires rose, the church burned, and generations died without knowing what survived beneath the marble. Then, on the night of October 26, 2016, the doors of the church closed early. A team of scientists entered. Priests gathered outside. Under harsh lights, the researchers lifted a marble slab that had not been moved for centuries. Beneath it, they found an unexpected layer. Then another. They had only 60 hours before the tomb had to be sealed again. But why did the tomb open in this generation? Was it merely urgent restoration? Or had technology, human agreement, and ancient timing finally aligned? What emerged was quieter than treasure, a physical trail leading toward the place humanity remembers as the empty tomb. Placed beside prophecies about sealed knowledge, opened graves, and Jerusalem, it raised a darker question. Did scientists simply uncover ancient stone, or did the opening trigger a mystery that is only beginning? If ancient faith and real human discovery matter to you, subscribe to our channel. There is much more beneath this stone. The night the church closed. The Church of the Holy Sepulchre usually does not become silent. Pilgrims move through its dark passages from morning until night, while ancient Christian communities follow rituals older than many nations. But on that October evening, the great wooden doors closed early. Visitors waiting outside did not understand why. Inside, the atmosphere changed from worship to controlled urgency. At the center stands a small stone shrine called the Edicule, a little house built around what Christians venerate as the tomb of Jesus. Its inner chamber holds only a few people at once. That night, it was crowded with conservators, instruments, and clergy from the Christian communities sharing custody of the sanctuary. Under the ancient status quo agreement, changes to shared sacred spaces require consent. Opening the burial surface demanded something rare, agreement among traditions that had guarded it for centuries. That agreement matters because nobody entered alone and nobody could quietly replace what was found. Clergy, conservators, and researchers watched the same operation. Whatever emerged would be documented inside a sanctuary where even minor changes normally require negotiation. The team was led by Professor Antonia Moropoulou of the National Technical University of Athens. She was not there to test a miracle. Her task was more immediate. The Edicule was failing. Its mortar had weakened, and iron supports still gripped the shrine. Engineers feared eventual collapse. To save it, the team needed to reach the original rock hidden beneath later construction. And that meant doing what almost no living person believed they would ever witness. They would have to open the tomb. Why did centuries of disagreement give way now? Could the danger of collapse have been the human mechanism that finally broke history's seal? Why the original stone disappeared? For centuries, pilgrims entered the burial chamber and knelt beside a polished marble surface. Many assumed that slab was the tomb itself. It was not. The marble was a protective covering placed over a much older limestone burial bed cut into the rock. Historical accounts indicate that marble had covered the surface by at least 1555, and possibly since the 14th century. Pilgrims carried fragments home as relics. If every visitor removed a piece, the shelf would disappear. The covering protected the rock from devotion powerful enough to destroy what it loved. By 2016, nobody looking at the upper slab could know exactly what remained beneath it. The tomb had survived repeated rebuilding, but survival was not the same as certainty. The present Edicule dates mainly to 1808 to 1810, after fire damaged the earlier shrine. It is relatively modern beside the story surrounding it. That created a disturbing possibility. What if the original cave had been lost long ago, and the visible shrine was only a memorial placed over ruins? What if wars, fires, and rebuilding had broken the physical connection between the modern chamber and the burial site, identified in antiquity? The upper slab was the final barrier between a living religious tradition and the material evidence beneath it. When the researchers lifted it, they did not immediately see the clean rock bed they expected. They saw gray-beige fill material packed underneath. The fill could conceal damaged stone, later construction, or an older surface. Every handful removed risked undisturbed material. Why had earlier builders placed one covering beneath another? Were they simply strengthening the chamber, or deliberately sealing something they believed future generations must not lose? If the upper marble was only the latest barrier, how many hands had protected the coordinates without seeing the rock? To understand the next layer, the story must return to the tomb's first human hours. The four canonical Gospels do not describe a palace tomb prepared for a king. They describe a hurried burial carried out before the Sabbath by a small group facing fear, grief, and time. According to the accounts, Joseph of Arimathea, a wealthy member of the council and a secret follower of Jesus, asked the Roman governor Pontius Pilate for the body. In John's Gospel, Nicodemus arrived with myrrh and aloes. The body was wrapped in linen and placed inside a new tomb cut from rock. The crowds were gone. The disciples were scattered. Joseph had followed quietly, while women watched the burial because they intended to return with spices. John adds one geographical detail that became crucial almost 2,000 years later. There was a garden near the place of crucifixion, and within that garden was a new tomb. Matthew says a large stone was rolled across the entrance. It also describes the tomb being secured with a seal and a guard. Luke stresses that the women saw the tomb and how the body was laid. Mark names Mary Magdalene and Mary the mother of Joseph as witnesses to the location. These details also seem to touch older biblical patterns. In Isaiah 53, the suffering servant is rejected, wounded, and given a burial associated in many translations with the wicked and the rich. Christians connect it with a crucified man receiving wealthy Joseph's unused tomb. Psalm 16 says God will not abandon his faithful one to the grave or corruption. Acts applies those words to Christ's resurrection. Hosea 6 speaks of revival after 2 days and rising on the third. Its setting concerns Israel, yet Christians hear an echo of the sealed tomb and third morning. Are these only themes later believers placed over the story? Or did the burial unfold through details already waiting inside Scripture? Could the rich man's tomb, escape from decay, and third day explain why this chamber mattered before Christianity possessed power? Jesus chose fishermen and a tax collector. Yet the first witnesses to the empty tomb were women with little public power. Why did this location survive when its first defenders possessed no army, office, or monument? If later Christians preserved the correct coordinates, the ground should match the burial accounts. It should have been outside Jerusalem's walls, suitable for execution, cut by tombs, and close to a garden. Scientists would eventually discover that the land remembered more than anyone expected. Today, the church stands inside the old city of Jerusalem, creating an apparent contradiction. Roman and Jewish burial custom generally placed tombs outside the wall, and John says Jesus was crucified outside the city. If the church had always stood deep inside Jerusalem, how could it cover the correct tomb? Archaeology changed the map. In the 1st century, the area was beyond the wall. It had been a stone quarry whose abandoned rock faces were adapted for burials. Archaeologists found 1st century tombs nearby. The edicule's shelf resembles burial beds used by wealthy Jerusalem families. The landscape therefore fits a grim but logical pattern. A disused quarry outside the wall could provide an exposed rock known as Golgotha, the place of the skull, where Roman executions occurred. Nearby cuttings could become tombs. Soil spread across abandoned quarry surfaces could support cultivation. Execution place, garden, new tomb, all within walking distance. If the Gospel described a garden, tombs, and an execution site together, how many matching details can remain coincidence? Could the writers have invented a convenient landscape, or were they remembering a real place whose shape remained buried beneath Jerusalem? The church compresses those locations beneath one roof. a tomb cannot say, Jesus of Nazareth. Yet archaeology can ask whether the place is wrong, and so far, the ground has refused to disqualify it. That matters because the location passed through war and deliberate urban transformation. In AD 70, Roman forces destroyed much of Jerusalem. After another revolt, Emperor Hadrian remade the city as Aelia Capitolina in the 2nd century. A Roman temple was built over the area later associated with the tomb. To some historians, that should have erased the Christian memory, but the opposite may have happened. Could Hadrian's temple have accidentally preserved the exact location it was meant to erase? Roman construction covered the older ground. If Christians kept saying the tomb lay beneath it, the pagan sanctuary may have marked the site for the future. Was erasure transformed into protection? Did the temple become a stone pointer toward where to dig? 2 centuries after the crucifixion, an emperor would order that temple torn down. What workers found beneath it changed Jerusalem forever. In the 4th century, Emperor Constantine the Great authorized a search. Christian writers describe his representatives demolishing the Roman temple and excavating beneath it. Constantine's mother, Helena, became inseparable from the search for sacred sites. The bishop Macarius of Jerusalem helped establish the sanctuary. Eusebius of Caesarea wrote that once the later structures and earth were removed, the cave appeared. Workers cut away surrounding rock, leaving the chamber as an isolated core. A shrine rose around it. That operation was destructive as well as protective. Constantine's builders removed the surrounding hillside so the tomb could stand visibly at the center. If they had selected the wrong cave, later generations would still inherit an impressive shrine, but the geology beneath it would eventually expose the break. The original dedication took place in the 4th century, with the Great Constantinian Church completed around AD 335. Christians called it the Church of the Resurrection. This is the critical bridge in the story. The Gospels come from the 1st century, the monument from the 4th. Between them, Jerusalem was destroyed and transformed. Could the correct location have survived that gap? One possibility is continuous local memory. Families, worshippers, and clergy could pass a location from one generation to another, even when they could not control it. Another possibility is that the Roman temple itself preserved the coordinates. If Christians objected because it covered a venerated place, the structure would keep directing attention to the same ground. Could ordinary worshippers have preserved the coordinates more faithfully than emperors preserved buildings? What if no map was needed because each generation led the next to the same ground? What if Constantine's workers uncovered the place memory refused to surrender? An imperial church proves belief, not identity. But the 2016 opening could test whether today's chamber retained a physical connection. If the earliest material beneath the marble dated only to the Crusades, the chain would be broken. If it reached the 4th century, the surviving rock core would be the same physical tomb first enclosed when Rome searched for Jesus' burial place. If that connection survived, how much destruction could it endure before survival looked extraordinary? Before that answer emerged, however, the site would endure 1,000 years of attempts to damage, rebuild, and possess it. The tomb that refused to disappear. The history above the burial chamber reads like a list of disasters. The first great church was damaged during the Persian capture of Jerusalem in AD 614. It was repaired, then faced another catastrophe in 1009, when the Fatimid Caliph al-Hakim ordered the sanctuary destroyed. The demolition reached the foundations, and the rock-cut tomb was attacked, the most dangerous break in the chain. If the cave was smashed in 1009, what exactly were later builders protecting? The church rose again. Crusaders captured Jerusalem in 1099 and reshaped the sanctuary. Much of its layout comes from that rebuilding. Control changed repeatedly. Christian communities developed overlapping rights, while 2 Muslim families came to hold the entrance keys. Inside, Christian communities governed the sacred space through precise custom. Fire struck in 1808. The edicule was rebuilt by 1810, then later surrounded by metal girders. Every new layer protected the tomb while also concealing it. Marble hid limestone. Mortar hid earlier mortar. Ritual prevented excavation until weakness made it unavoidable. Walls could be rebuilt anywhere. Decorative stone could be replaced. Yet each reconstruction placed the sacred chamber over the same inner point. That repeated choice is what turns architecture into mystery. Buildings changed, while the coordinate at their center did not. Could each disaster have triggered another act of protection? Could the people rebuilding after fire and conquest have known that the chamber's value was not in its decoration, but in one particular shelf of rock? This is why the 2016 opening was not simple curiosity. Touching the tomb carried two risks. Scientists could damage the most sacred place in Christianity, or everyone could leave it untouched until it collapsed. Was the structural crisis merely a threat, or the event that finally forced the hidden layers into the light? The churches chose preservation. A budget exceeding $4 million brought specialists experience with the Acropolis of Athens and Hagia Sophia. If you are still with us, subscribe, because the next layer is where this ancient human story becomes much harder to dismiss. The tomb had survived fire, earthquake, empire, and division. Now it had to survive science. Around 50 specialists worked largely at night while pilgrims continued visiting. They used ground-penetrating radar, laser scanning, infrared thermography, endoscopic cameras, and material analysis to locate hidden rock and structural weakness. Moropoulou's team mapped the edicule in 3 dimensions, removed failing mortar, and strengthened voids without erasing history. But the burial bed remained the most sensitive point. On October 26th, the upper marble covering was pulled away. Researchers documented each stage as priests watched nearby. The first surprise was the amount of debris and fill beneath the slab. The material came out slowly because dust, mortar, and fragments could record earlier rebuilding. But the chamber could not remain open. No one knew whether the next centimeters would reveal intact limestone or evidence that the original tomb had vanished. Every removed fragment narrowed the possibilities, while the 60-hour deadline forced the team toward an answer. As the fill came away, a second marble slab appeared. It was older, damaged, and marked with a carved cross. It was another protective layer above the rock, suggesting earlier builders intentionally marked the burial place. For a brief moment, the cross lay visible beneath the removed stone, a hidden Christian sign inside a chamber already surrounded by one of the world's largest churches. Could the cross carved into the hidden slab have been a message from builders who knew what lay beneath it? Why mark a slab destined to disappear? Decoration, or a warning that sacred rock lay below? The team continued. Under the broken slab, the color changed. The smooth marble ended. Pale, natural rock emerged. It was the original limestone shelf. It had survived the destruction of 1009 and fire of 1808. Much of the cave remained inside the edicule. For the first time in centuries, scientists were looking directly at the burial bed generations had protected from view. Had the opening triggered nothing more than a scientific survey? Or had it reopened questions that priests, empires, and skeptics had carried for nearly 2,000 years? The real question was whether that stone could tell them when the tomb had first been enclosed. People imagine an open tomb yielding bones, inscriptions, sealed jars, a lost gospel, or an object capable of ending an argument forever. The chamber offered none of those things. What scientists exposed was the original limestone burial surface, empty, intact, and hidden beneath centuries of construction. To someone expecting spectacle, that may sound disappointing. Within the Christian story, it is exactly what should remain. The faith has never claimed that Jesus' body waited inside the tomb for archaeologists. Its central claim is that the tomb was found empty. Still, the scientists did not announce that they had proved the resurrection. A laboratory can examine stone, mortar, and construction phases. It cannot place a supernatural event under a microscope. But could emptiness itself be the one result most consistent with the story Christians carried for 2,000 years? An empty shelf cannot prove why, yet a body would contradict the resurrection claim, while emptiness preserves its central mystery. The original burial shelf survived. So did part of the cave. This was not a 19th century symbolic room without ancient rock. Was the greatest discovery not an object inside the tomb, but proof that nobody had replaced the original stone? Someone cut the shelf. 4th century builders isolated it. Later, workers returned after destruction. Rival churches finally allowed scientists inside. No generation controlled the whole story. Each passed it forward. Could that chain have survived by accident? Or was the stone preserved because every generation understood that changing it would break something larger than architecture? Scientists recorded the chamber and sampled mortar joining rock and marble. After 60 hours, the bed was covered again. The visible moment was over. Using light stored in grains of quartz, optically stimulated luminescence dated when the mortar was sealed. Medieval results would break the link to Constantine. When the dates returned, they reached far deeper and made the speculation harder to dismiss. The dates hidden inside the mortar. The most important result came from material no pilgrim would notice. Mortar between limestone and marble dated to about AD 345, within Constantine's age. The cave's southern wall produced AD 335. Entrance mortar matched the 11th century, while later work dated near 1570. The method did not date Jesus or the limestone itself. It measured when mineral grains in the mortar were last exposed to light. That distinction protects the credibility of the result. Scientists were not claiming a supernatural identification. They were establishing when human builders sealed the surviving rock beneath marble. The sequence followed the history: 4th century enclosure, destruction and medieval reconstruction, 16th century repair, modern restoration. If 4th, 11th and 16th century layers repeatedly returned to the same rock, were builders following plans or inherited human memory? The tomb did not say, "Jesus was here." It yielded a timeline showing today's shrine still surrounds Constantine-era rock. Could generations rebuild around one point without knowing why? Or does the sequence reveal one instruction: protect this rock? Then the earth beneath the wider church added another detail. Work begun in 2022, led by Professor Francesca Romana Stassola of Sapienza University of Rome, examined the quarry. Soil revealed pre-Hadrian cultivation, including olive trees and grapevines. The material does not identify Joseph's garden, but it gives physical form to cultivated ground beside burials outside the city. The botanical remains still require careful dating, yet their position beneath later construction matters. The finding does not create the gospel garden from nothing. It shows that cultivated ground really belonged to the earlier landscape that the church later buried. Why did evidence of cultivation emerge only after modern restoration opened the floor? Was another piece of the gospel landscape waiting for the right tools and the right generation to uncover it? The site was outside the wall, adapted for burials and cultivated before the Roman city covered it. 4th century builders then preserved its cave. No point proves the whole claim. Together, they make the site a serious candidate. But what if these discoveries are part of a larger pattern? Sealed places opening, forgotten landscapes returning, and ancient words becoming newly visible through modern science. Why did this particular tomb become the center of the human story? And did opening it simply answer an old question, or trigger a new one? Was something triggered when the marble moved? Not a hidden device or countdown. Something human began. Facts returned, prophecies were reread, and faith became stone people could examine. Prophecy rarely arrives with a label explaining which modern event completes which ancient sentence. Meanings are debated precisely because patterns may become visible only after several events align. For believers, a trigger need not be an explosion or miracle. It can be the moment an old question changes from inherited tradition into measurable evidence. Daniel 12 speaks of a message sealed until the end time. It does not name this tomb. Yet the image is unsettling, knowledge closed for generations, then exposed. Could the 2016 opening belong to that pattern? Another sealed thing becoming visible? Ezekiel 37 describes God opening graves and restoring Israel. It is not an excavation prophecy. But why has that language returned where the world's most famous empty tomb was exposed? Is it coincidence that Israel, Jerusalem, restoration, and resurrection meet in one landscape? In Acts 1, the disciples are told Jesus will return as he left. They then return from the Mount of Olives to Jerusalem. The promise points back toward real geography. Matthew 24 joins Jerusalem with watchfulness and Christ's final coming, while refusing a date. No one knows the day or hour. The tomb is not a calendar, but refusing a date is not refusing to notice a pattern. Some prophecies may concern events still entirely unknown. Others may be understood only in retrospect. The unsettling possibility is that uncovering this tomb did not complete the pattern. It may simply have returned Jerusalem's physical evidence to the center of it: a wealthy disciple's tomb, a matching landscape, a hidden cross, Constantine-era mortar, cultivated ground, passages about the third day, opened graves, sealed knowledge, and a return connected to Jerusalem. How many pieces must gather before curiosity becomes justified? Could science uncover what earlier generations preserved through worship? Could the trigger be faith, archaeology, and prophecy speaking about one location? Jesus chose fishermen and ordinary people. The tomb came from a fearful disciple. And Easter's message from women approaching a tomb with spices. If God works through history, the mechanism might look like unstable mortar, church agreement, and scientific instruments. One practical decision could open a slab. One opened slab could reveal an older cross. One hidden cross could lead to original limestone. One mortar sample could connect that limestone to the 4th century. And one discovery could make millions reread forgotten promises. The tomb was scarred by violence, demolished, rebuilt, and nearly lost. Yet beneath every later layer, the same bed remained. That is the discovery. Continuity. A 1st century burial cave. A 4th century shrine. Medieval builders returning to one core. Cultivated ground near tombs and execution rock. At the center, an empty place that shaped billions of lives. Was it a sign? Science cannot answer. But perhaps a chain began. Stone opened, dates returned, the garden emerged, and prophecies were read anew. The chamber was opened for only 60 hours, then sealed again. But the questions did not go back beneath the marble. After nearly 2,000 years, humanity is no longer asking only where Jesus was buried. It is asking why this place is being uncovered now, and what may be uncovered next. Subscribe to our channel for more ancient prophecies, human mysteries, and discoveries hidden beneath history.